Deleted episode of Peppa Pig, The Evil Force. An ordinary day, Peppa decided to draw, starting with a simple apple. But something went wrong and the apple simply dissolved into reality. Peppa couldn't believe her eyes. Her desire to test her new power led to the next step. Each new drawing disappeared from her world. Soon, Peppa realized her power knew no bounds. She left home in the name of experimentation and set a new goal: the school. Every stroke of her marker became a new threat. The school began to vanish from reality. The facade flickered and dissolved away. Peppa looked at the empty field. She felt like a god in a world of ink, but someone was watching her, always watching. Peppa sensed that something was wrong and decided to return, but what she saw shocked her, freezing her with fear. The room seemed empty, but that was a lie. Sitting before her was her doppelganger, drawing something. With each stroke, he recreated her appearance, frightening and alien. Peppa froze in horror, realizing her power had gained its own will. The doppelganger looked at her with hollow eyes as she slowly dissolved into the space, unable to save herself. Deleted Peppa Pig episode. One word. It was an ordinary day. She was sitting in the playroom playing with a ball. Suddenly, it started rolling slowly across the floor by itself. She looked at it in surprise. The ball stopped near the wall and suddenly a strange rustling sound was heard, like someone whispering behind her back. Peppa turned around. Nobody was there. Suddenly, the toys began to move on their own. Dolls swayed without wind. Cars rolled across the floor without her involvement. Peppa was frightened and looked into the mirror. Her reflection was terrifying. Her eyes darkened and her smile widened more than usual. Suddenly, the toys disappeared. The room grew darker. A shadow appeared in the mirror, rapidly approaching Peppa. She tried to turn away, but the mirror seemed to suck her inside. She didn't notice how she fell into it head first. Peppa found herself in a strange, dark cave. A piercing scream shattered the silence. Turning around, she saw many small, poor piglets who had been trapped there for several years. She realized that escaping on her own and rescuing these little ones was her mission. Illuminating the walls with a flashlight, she saw mysterious symbols resembling a cipher. She struggled for a long time to figure out how to rearrange the elements to form a word. Suddenly, it came to her. She quickly drew the symbols in the correct order and obtained the word love. Suddenly, the walls trembled, stones rained down, and the cave collapsed with a loud crash. The piglets were set free. They found themselves on a bright meadow bathed in sunlight. The little pigs thanked Peppa, and she rejoiced at her new friends. They were celebrating when they didn't notice someone watching them from behind a tree. Deleted episode of Peppa Pig, Secret Disappearance. It was an ordinary sunny day. Peppa was playing in the garden with Rebecca. Suddenly, she noticed that her friend Rebecca had disappeared. She looked around. No one was there. The garden was silent. Peppa began searching for Rebecca all over the garden. Suddenly, she spotted a silhouette of her friend behind a large tree. The figure stood still, as if frozen. Rebecca's eyes were black as a bottomless abyss, and her face seemed made of shadow, as if it was dissolving into the air. When Peppa took a step closer, the silhouette suddenly vanished. At that moment, everything around started to distort. The trees appeared blurry. Sounds became muffled and echoed in her ears. Peppa felt a chill down her spine and a slight shiver, as if something sinister was approaching. Peppa tried to scream, but her voice got stuck in her throat. The figure began slowly approaching her, disappearing and reappearing again, as if playing a game of cat and mouse. The world around her started glitching more intensely. Colors blurred, space seemed endless and unreal. At this moment, the figure disappeared just as suddenly as it had appeared. Suddenly, Rebecca ran out from behind the tree. She was running after Peppa with a desperate look in her eyes. Terrified, Peppa ran toward Rebecca's house. Inside, she saw a family of rabbits.
Something's wrong with Rebecca. She looks very strange.
Their faces were terrifying, twisted features, eyes glowing red. Rebecca's parents turned slowly toward her with mad eyes and asked,
Who is Rebecca?
Deleted episode of Peppa Pig. It was not worth going there. A cheerful atmosphere filled the house. Peppa, George, and Susie were gathering to watch a new cartoon. Mommy Pig was preparing treats, and Daddy Pig was telling funny stories. Suddenly, a strange creak sounded inside the house. Peppa and Susie exchanged glances, smiles fading from their faces.
What was that?
Asked Susie.
Probably just the wind.
Replied Peppa, but her eyes looked worried. The children decided to explore the house. In the bathroom, they noticed an old pipe pulsing slightly, emitting an ominous sound. Cracks were visible on its surface. Peppa, unable to resist curiosity, stepped closer. Suddenly, the pipes began to shake and whispering voices called out from within.
Come down to us,
they seemed to say from deep inside, and Peppa felt a shiver run down her spine. At that moment, Mommy Pig returned and sharply said,
Children, don't go too close to the pipes.
Her voice sounded frightened.
These pipes could be dangerous.
But her warning only heightened their fear and their excitement. Unexpectedly, the pipes started stretching out like living creatures and grabbed George.
Help!
Shouted Peppa. Susie rushed to help, but was also caught.
You won't escape.
A sinister whisper echoed, and Peppa realized they were trapped.
What to do? We can't leave!
Cried Susie. Peppa watched as the pipes pulled George into darkness. Peppa! Susie! He called out as his voice faded away behind the wall. Peppa and Susie were terrified.
Don't let go of each other!
Shouted Peppa, but it was too late. They felt cold tentacles of the pipes wrap around them, and soon they too were pressed against the wall, unable to move. At that moment, Mommy and Daddy ran into the bathroom, but upon seeing what was happening, they froze in horror.
Peppa, George, run!
Shouted Mommy Pig, but now the pipes began stretching toward them as well. The parents tried to run, but it was too late. The pipes seized them and they disappeared into darkness. When everything fell silent, only empty walls remained in the bathroom. Peppa and Susie, pressed against the wall, watched as the pipes became still again. Fear and despair flickered in their eyes. They understood that they had lost not only George, but also Peppa's parents. Peppa and George were playing hide and seek. Just like always, George chose a cozy spot, a little further than usual. Peppa was walking through an empty hall. The house seemed frozen in time. George was hiding well, too well. Mommy Pig was washing the dishes, but her movements were a bit slowed down.
Mommy, George isn't coming out!
He always plays like that.
Peppa felt the presence of something supernatural. The wardrobe where George was hiding was now closer than before. George was always nearby, but he wasn't here. The game of hide and seek had long since crossed into another realm. Peppa approached the window. There was George. He was outside, looking at Peppa and trying to get her attention. Turning around, Peppa noticed that George was also inside. She went outside. The yard was empty. The grass was pressed down, as if someone had just left. But now, in the window, there was her, the one who hadn't come out. Peppa decided to go back home. The door creaked as if someone was pulling it at the same time she did. Something in the house had changed, like it was shrinking. The wardrobe remained, but it no longer hid anything. Peppa entered the kitchen. George sat with his back to her at the table. He was waiting, but something was wrong. His face was blurred. He whispered, "You lose. The game was over." But had it ever really begun? Peppa and George decided to take a walk in the forest and stumbled upon an old, abandoned house. It looked very gloomy. Broken windows, overgrown bushes, creaky door. Inside, it was dark and cold. Cracked portraits hung on the walls. Their eyes seemed alive. Suddenly, it became dark outside the window. At that moment, a strange woman appeared. The owner of the house. Her face was pale, and her eyes were cold and frightening. She smiled strangely and said,
Welcome. You shouldn't have come here.
Suddenly, she began to change. Her face distorted. Her eyes shone with bright red light, and something black flowed out of them. Peppa tried to run, but the door slammed shut by itself. The demon owner grabbed Peppa and George with her long claws. Their screams disappeared into the darkness. Everything around started to distort. The house's owner dragged the children into her dark basement. Peppa and George were tied up. Their mouths were covered with rags. The owner was boiling something murky in a huge cauldron and muttered,
Soon I will enjoy this.
Peppa turned around and saw Susie and Rebecca. They were also tied up and trembling with fear. Suddenly, a familiar, sinister whisper sounded. The door opened. Standing in the doorway was Evie, with tentacles and a sinister smile. She grabbed the house owner with one of her tentacles and swallowed her with a sinister sound. Afterward, Evie smiled sweetly but continued to radiate horror. The children were scared. They already knew what awaited them. Evie wasn't full yet and was planning to fix that.